Chapter 13 of the Complete Works of Artemus Ward, Part 2, War, by Charles Farrar Browne. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13. Artemus Ward to the Prince of Wales.
Friend Wales, you remember me. I saw you in Canada a few years ago. I remember you too. I seldom forget a person. I hearn of your marriage to the Princess Alexandry, and meant to writ you a congratulatory letter at the time, but I've been building a barn this summer and hain't had no time to write letters to folks. Excuse me. Numerous changes has tooken place since we met in the body politic. The body politic, in fact, is sick. I sometimes think it has got biles, friend Wales. In my country we've got war, while your country, in conjunction with Captain Sims of the Alabamy, maintains a neutral position. I'm afraid I can't write jokes when I sit about it. Oh no, I guess not. Yes, sir, we've got a war, and the true patriot has to make sacrifices. You bet. I have already given 2 cousins to the war, and I stand ready to sacrifice my wife's brother rather than not see the rebellion crushed. And if wuss comes to wuss, I'll shed every drop of blood my able-bodied relations has got to prosecute the war. I think somebody ought to be prosecuted, and it may as well be the war as anybody else. When I get a jokin' fit into me, it's no use to try to stop me. You heard about the draft, friend Wales. No doubt it caused some squirmin', but it was fairly conducted, I think, for it hit all classes. It is true that Wendell Phillips, who is a American citizen of African scent, 'scaped, but so did Vallandigham, who is conservative, and who was recently sent South, though he would have been sent to the Dry Tortugas if Abe had s'posed for a minute that the Tortugases would keep him. We hain't got any daily paper in our town, but we got a female sewin' circle which answers the same purpose, and we wasn't long in suspects as to who was drafted. One young man who was drawed claimed to be exempt because he was the only son of a widowed mother who supported him. A few able-bodied dead men was drafted, but whether their heirs will have to pay $300 apiece for them is a question for Whitin, who 'pears to be tinkerin' up this draft business right smart. I hope he makes good wages. I think most of the conscripts in this place will go. A few will go to Canady, stopping on their way at Concord, N.H., where I understand there is a Muslim of Hearts. You see, I'm sassy, friend Wales, hittin' all sides, but no offense is meant. You know I ain't a politician and never was. I vote for Mr. Union. That's the only candidate I've got. I claim, howsoever, to have a well-balanced mind, though my ideas of a well-balanced mind differs from the ideas of a partner I once had, whose name it was Billson. Billson and me organized a strollin' dramatic company, and we played the drunkard, or the falling saved, with a real drunkard. The play didn't take particularly, and says Billson to me, "Let's give him some immoral drammy." We had a large troupe unto our hands, consistin' of 8 tragedians and a bass drum, but I says, "No, Billson," and then I says, "Billson, you hain't got a well balanced mind." Well, says he, "Yes, I have, old hossfly." He was a low cuss. "Yes, I have. I have a mind," says he, "that balances in any direction that the public requires. That's what I call a well balanced mind." I sold out and bid adoo to Billson. He is now an outcast in the State of Vermont. The miserable man once played Hamlet. There wasn't any orchestry, and wishin' to expire to slow moosic, he died playin' on a clarionet hisself, interspersed with heart-rendin' groans, and such is the world. Alars, alars, how onthankful we air to that Providence which kindly allows us to live and borrow money and fail undo business. But to return to our subject. With our recent great triumphs on the Mississippi, the father of waters, and them is waters no father need feel shamed of. Twig the witticism? and the cheerin' look of things in other places, I reckon we shan't want any Muslim of Hearts. And what upon airth do the people of Concord, New H. want a Muslim of Hearts for? Ain't you got a State House now? And what more do you want? But all this is furrin to the purpose of this note, arter all. My object in now addressin' you is to give you some advice, friend Wales, about managin' your wife, a business I've had over 30 years experience in. You had a good weddin'. The papers have a good deal to say about Vikings in connection therewith. Not knowin's what they air, and so I frankly tells you, my noble Lord Duke of the Throne, I can't exactly say whether we have 'em or not. We was both very much frustrated. But I never enjoyed myself better in my life. Doubtless your supper was a head of iron. As regards eatin' uses, Baldinsville was allers shaky. But you can get a good meal in New York, and cheap too. You can get half a mackerel at Delmonico's or Mr. Mason Dory's for $6, and biled pertaters throwed in. As I said, I managed my wife without any partic'lar trouble. When I first commenced trainin' her, I instituted a series of experiments, and them as didn't work I abandoned. You better do sim'lar. Your wife may object to gettin' up and buildin' the fire in the mornin', but if you commence with her at once you may be able to overcome this prejudice. I regret to observe that I didn't commence arly enough. I wouldn't have you s'pose I was ever kicked out of bed. Not at all. I simply say, in regard to buildin' fires, that I didn't commence arly enough. It was a rather cold mornin' when I first proposed the idea to Betsy. It wasn't well received, and I found myself layin' on the floor putty suddent. I thought I'd get up and build the fire myself. Of course, now you're married, you can eat onions. I allus did, and if I know my own heart, I allus will. My daughter, who's goin' on 17 and is frisky, says they're disgustin'. And speakin' of my daughter reminds me that quite a number of young men have suddenly discovered that I'm a very entertainin' old feller, and they visit us frequently, especially on Sunday evenin's. One young chap, a lawyer by habit, don't come as much as he did. My wife's father lives with us. His intellect totters a little, and he saves the papers containin' the proceedin's of our State Legislator. The old gentleman likes to read out loud, and he reads tolerable well. He eats hash freely, which makes his voice clear, but as he unfortunately has to spell the most of his words, I may say he reads slow. Well, whenever this lawyer made his appearance I would set the old man a readin' the legislative reports. I kept the young lawyer up one night till 12 o'clock listenin' to a lot of acts in regard to a drawbridge away off in the east part of the State, havin' sent my daughter to bed at half-past 8. He hasn't been there since, and I understand he says I go round swindlin' the public. I never attempted to reorganize my wife but onct. I shall never attempt agin. I'd been to a public dinner, and had allowed myself to be betrayed into drinkin' several people's healths, and wishin' to make 'em as robust as possible, I continued drinkin' their healths until my own became affected. Consequence was, I presented myself at Betsy's bedside late at night with considerable liquor concealed about my person. I had somehow got procession of a horsewhip on my way home, and rememberin' some cranky observations of Mrs. Ward's in the mornin', I snapped the whip pretty lively, and in a very loud voice I said, "Betsy, you need reorganizin'. I have come, Betsy," I continued, crackin' the whip over the bed. "I have come to reorganize you. Have you parade to-night." I dreamed that somebody had laid a hosswhip over me several consecutive times, and when I woke up I found she had. I hain't drank much of anything since, and if I ever have another reorganizing job on my hand I shall let it out. My wife is 52 years old, and has always sustained a good character. She's a good cook. Her mother lived to a venerable age, and died while in the act of fryin' slapjacks for the County Commissioners, and may no rude hand pluck a flower from her tombstone. We ain't got any pictur of the old lady, because she never stand for her ambrotype, and therefore I can't give her likeness to the world through the medium of the illustrated papers. But as she wasn't a Brigadier Gineral, particularly, I don't suppose they'd publish it anyhow. It's best to give a woman considerable leeway, but not too much. A neighbor of mine, Mr. Rufus Minkins, was once very sick with the fever, but his wife moved his bed into the door yard while she was cleanin' house. I told Rufus this wasn't the thing, specially as it was rainin' violently, but he said he wanted to give his wife a little leeway. That was too much. I told Mrs. Minkins that her Rufus would die if he stayed out there into the rain much longer, when she said, "It shan't be my fault if he dies unprepared," at the same time tossin' him his mother's Bible. It was orful. I stood by, however, and nussed him as well as I could, but I was a pretty wet nurse, I tell you. There's various ways of managin' a wife, friend Wales, but the best and only safe way is to let her do just about as she wants to. I 'dopted that there plan some time ago, and it works like a charm. Remember me kindly to Mrs. Wales, and good luck to you both, and as years roll by and accidents begin to happen to you, among which I hope there'll be twins, you will agree with me that family joys are the only ones a man can bet on with any certainty of winning. It may interest you to know that I'm prosperin' in a pecuniary pint of view. I make 'bout as much in the course of a year as a Cabinet officer does, and I understand my business a good deal better than some of them do. Respects to St. George and the Dragon. Ever be happy, A. Ward.
End of chapter 13. End of the complete works of Artemus Ward, Part II, War, by Charles Farrar Browne.